by saying that, let's set the context. The context is, have we overdone it, right? When we talk about AI and cybersecurity, these two areas, how do they come together? There's AI for cybersecurity, and there is cybersecurity for AI, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss both aspects. We're going to at least try. The first question, and I'd like to actually point it to Ms. Daisy, what has changed, if we were to look at the larger picture, the big picture, in terms of AI coming into cybersecurity, what has changed?
I think as what happens with all technologies, and AI is no different in that sense, it is of course, as we've been hearing over the last few days, a technology that will redefine humanity and how we live, work, play, all of that. But one thing that it has in common with all of the other technologies that have come before it is that it's both an opportunity and a challenge. And it's particularly true when it comes to the security space. So on one side, there is the promise that, for some time now, with the advent of technologies, number of things getting connected, all of our lives going phygital, cyber threats have become, the landscape is of course expanded, and threats have become more and more complex and complicated. And for some time now, we've not been able to manage cybersecurity at human scale. So machine scale was, a lot of tooling was already in that space. So there is the promise with AI that you can manage security better. So there is definitely that opportunity. But at the same time, there is a recognition, like Dario Amadai said on the main stage yesterday, that his biggest concern, and all of our concerns, is that AI brings a set of risks, which not all of them that we know of at this point in time today. So both of these, so it's also, like I said, that commonality is there with all technologies that came before it. It is both a challenge and an opportunity and a challenge. Because we've got to protect models from being jailbroke.
Yeah.
We've got to make sure that the models don't leak our confidential information or poison our data. We've got to make sure that most of these are open source models, that they come with inherent vulnerabilities, so how do we detect them? So we've got to think about securing AI as well.
Absolutely, and very rightly said. So it's becoming fundamental part of the infrastructure that is being then used to build applications. So earlier, I think the perspective which changed was that we were looking at AI just at the application layer, but it's gone much below in the infrastructure. It's got embedded into the kind of systems which are now getting created and deployed for citizen scale. So, and that is where I'd like to bring in Naren sir, your perspectives on what are you seeing in terms of national security? Is it something which is giving us a spike, a blip, something which you can disclose here?
Yeah, I mean, it requires to be discussed. That's one thing is definite. I take the points that you've said. One thing about all the other technological revolutions, as you said, is that there was a time frame over which that seeped into the system. Okay, and then we had time to look at how do I use it beneficially, and also to look at the adversarial effects of it and how do I mitigate those things. Case of AI is that it's really happening at a breakneck speed. And there's also an adoption, willingness to adopt into enterprises of the different AI tools that are there. So that is where the scary part is there. And the other is the adversarial part of the AI is that though, we are, you use AI for cybersecurity, but the issue is that there are nation states or big enterprises, which are adversarial enterprises, which would be using AI as a tool for doing it, and they have got a lot of motivation to put in effort and thought process into how do I use it more effectively. Then the persons who are actually using AI for their own benefit, in terms of they're looking at, how do I improve my productivity, how do I improve my efficiency, that's the focus area that they're in. So this is where there's a disconnect, and this has to be really bridged. And that's where the problem is. This summit actually, in one way, it's helping people become conscious about some of the measures that are to be taken. That is one part. The other is the difference between other systems and this is, and got a little technical in the sense that, in the other systems, we have a separate control plane and a separate data plane. And there we could actually control, they provide access the limits to the control plane. But here, the data itself is the control. So you have that poisoning of models happening through the inputs that are there. So you could have a drift, and over a period of time, you'll find that the model will not be behaving as you would expect it to behave. And it's not also very deterministic. So there are challenges in, how do I protect it now, this AI systems, to see that it gives me the consistent results, after a period of time. Then there is also lack of clarity about, what is a cybersecurity issue there, and what is the issue of malfunctioning or a poor design of an AI system. That lack of clarity also results in, the challenges that are there. I think these are the preliminary thoughts that I have. So at the national scale, the issue is that when you have multiple entities at the enterprise scale and financial sector, the telecom sector, and all of them, and the power sector adopting AI, the effect on compromises on the critical information infrastructure is something that would actually make us wake up and then see that what could be done. So those are issues that are there.
Excellent pointers, sir. Excellent pointers. And I think since you brought in the private sector, and the way they've evolved, and they're also subjected to these risks which are evolving in nature. I'd like to bring in Lakshmi sir from Tata here. So, sir, a lot of infrastructure is being built, connected, communicated using what you're building for the nation. So, how are you seeing the paradigm shift from, let's say, how it used to be before AI was commoditized and an everyday technology? It used to be in the labs. Now it's out and in everybody's hands. So what is the change that you are seeing and the impact you're seeing on critical infrastructure?
I don't think people have woken up to the fact that they are fast running towards the cliff. Because I genuinely think that the digital infrastructure in enterprises today are already fragile. Right? And we know that from an enterprise security point of view, there are so many attacks that are happening. And we know that there are huge issues when it comes to, for example, now we more talk about IT/OT security. The operational technology in factories were never in the purview of IT security, and there are security today and digital infrastructure in general is still very fragile. It's islands of different OEM technologies and many things, and I don't want to it is a major issue. Now, on top of this fragility, you add AI, and this fragility is going to be multiplied 100 times over, right? On many counts. Because AI is going to increase the network traffic, especially the east-west traffic, by again multifold. The number of API calls that somebody, and we all are saying, oh, I'll embed AI at the edge of the device, and if I have a banking application, I will do that. But nobody has thought through, if I put an inference there, or if you put an inferencing at the edge, the number of API calls these have to do is tremendous. And these API calls are long-lived sessions. They're not traditional API calls. So the edge infrastructure is going to come under tremendous strain. So that's why I'm saying that in all our excitement of AI, I'm very passionate and excited about AI, but I genuinely feel that people are not looking at the foundations properly, right? So that is very fragile, and that is one point I want to make. The second point about this is I would like to expand the scope of this discussion. It's not about AI and cybersecurity alone. It's also about a broader trust question. And I think with we all know, whether fake, the messages, you don't know. Apply that in the enterprise context. And I know there was a talk about model drifts and so on and so forth. So what we at Tata.com are doing, one is to protect the digital infrastructure through many things that we can do. And the unfortunate part is I don't think enterprises have woken up to the fact that they have to do it. So I tell them that you can't build a skyscraper with a foundation of a bungalow, which is what they're trying to do. But when it comes to the drift and the trust part of it, I do believe that enterprises require an AI operating system. Right? And what we mean by that AI operating system is something that brings the context together. Because LLMs will provide the knowledge. To make that knowledge into actionable intelligence, you need the context layer, you need the agentic layer, and more importantly, you need to have a trust and governance layer which will control what an agent will do or will not do. Right? And if I take that control in my hands and say that I will configure and ensure this agent will do something or not do something, I can make use of the models underneath a lot more intelligently. Right? So I think rather than focusing on whether this LLM is good or that LLM is good and so on, this AI operating system is what is required for people to build an application which will ensure that all of these are governed properly.
So that's a great point. In fact, I was having a conversation a few days back, and I was saying that from the time of corporate social responsibility, it's time to evolve to corporate AI responsibility, where corporates start talking about how they're controlling and owning the actions of the AI that they're building and deploying. A great perspective, sir. Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to bring in Richard to sort of continue the talk about digital infrastructure and resilience. So, how has resilience, in your perspective, evolved when we talk about AI risks to cybersecurity and vice versa?
Well, the question of resilience is a complex question. So I will bring few aspects that I think are very important. So it is well understood that that people are typically the weakest link in cybersecurity. The reason is that we as human beings, we were not evolved to deal with machines, computers, and so on, and most of us don't have really deep technical knowledge about how systems work and so on. So we are, to a big extent, dependent on relatively superficial understanding, and so we are more easy to be tricked by different social engineering tricks and so on. Now, with AI, this is becoming a big issue, because how you can distinguish a scam from a real communication when the scam communication looks exactly like the real communication. I'm talking about deepfakes and so on. So this is one aspect of the risk connected directly with people. The other aspect is that we want AI to empower people to do things, more things, and make them in an easier way. So we have those agents, and we give them some, or we want to give them some commands like do this for me or that for me, but we don't understand all the steps that the agent will take on our behalf when performing those tasks. And each of those tasks can be, there can be risk factors involved without us knowing. Like, okay, if you want to perform this action, you will need to have those additional tools to achieve that. And where you get those additional tools, okay, if AI decides on your behalf, these are the tools you need, software packages, whatever it is, and they get to your computer without this being supervised, then this is a problem. So where I'm heading, like, resilience here is really protecting or paying attention to details. What is actually happening? What is running in the background? How are your commands transferred to the agents? Is there a possibility for them to be intercepted, to be modified? So it was difficult and complex even before advent of the new AI agentic approach. Now it's becoming even more important to really go into all the details. And we just heard from Lakshmi that he sees that we are moving towards a cliff. Well, depends on us, of course. We want to go fast. We want to employ. We are all excited about AI, but maybe sometimes we need to slow down a little bit and make sure that the pieces are in the place and cybersecurity is not overlooked.
Excellent, excellent perspectives. And you know, I think an offshoot to that question can be to Ms. Daisy, which is, you know, what are you seeing as changing, you know, when you're talking about digital infra and especially the connectivity which it needs. You know, because you're at Cisco, right? And here is something which is connecting a lot of things to a lot of other things. So how are you seeing changes happening, especially when you talk about resilience and what's going inside digital infra?
So I think Lakshmi touched on a very important point of the fragility of the underlying infrastructure. And that is something that I want to reiterate. You know, for the past few years, we've been publishing an AI readiness index. And the good news is that we are as ready as everybody else. The bad news is maybe we're not that as ready as we think we are, which is the point Lakshmi is making, right? 90% of just under 1,000 large enterprises that we spoke to in India want to deploy agents this year. 40% want that agent to work alongside a human being. But only about 2/3 of those enterprises really have a data layer, data strategy, a data platform, and a data governance strategy. Only about 1/4 have the compute capacity they need. Only about 1/3 are able to understand AI threats and deal with them. And less than 1/5 have the innovation engine to think about building and scaling and maintaining AI applications and use cases. So clearly there is this ambition versus reality gap which we have to solve for. And that's not a problem, as long as we all know that that's where it is, and they were acutely aware of this issue. The other thing is AI is essentially leading to, what this means is that we are rewiring and restacking the enterprise. It's not just networks, it's compute, it's silicon. I know, you know, at the national level, silicon security is a conversation. So all this resiliency, which we used to build almost like a bolt-on at the top, and particularly we used to think of it only as cyber resiliency. It's a system resilience which is built into all layers of the infrastructure stack, all layers of the AI stack. Yeah. And that's why at Cisco, since you asked me a network-specific question, we used to have, you know, we used to deal with connectivity largely as connectivity. And now we know the persona of that end port that connects to an end device that might be doing an inferencing, or it's in the data center. That persona has to be that it will be on one side, it will be a switch or a router, but on the other side, it will also be a security defense point. So this ability of building special grade of security appliances and putting them in various parts of the network is fast becoming an outdated idea. And the point we've got to do is we've got to break it into a number of virtual instances that can go wherever you want the security policy to be. So it becomes a very virtual distributed mesh rather than a hardware. Yes, there will be hardware. I'm not saying it'll go away, but this ability to infuse it into the fabric, and networks tend to be the all-pervasive fabrics. That's the way, at least as Cisco, we're thinking about it. So these domains of networking and security are crashing together. So secure networking is like the conversation in the network space particularly. The other part about this is the performance requirement, which also Lakshmi alluded to. AI will put pressure on the underlying infrastructure in a way, it's an exponential technology. The demands it will create on its underlying layers is also exponential. Yeah. Right? So we've got to almost build a new category of technology, silicon systems, applications, everything. A new category has to be built, and we have to build it in new ways. You cannot build it in the ways of how we built it in the past. Applications is an interesting one, right? We used to give an input, expect the same output on the other side. But now, if you are going to deploy AI models, this thing is probabilistic, and sir referred to it. So you want to get it to a degree of assessment so that you cannot expect in a financial application or a very important citizen service application, you give an input and the output has to be deterministic, but you're using at the core of it a probabilistic technology. So that refinement also takes a whole lot of work. So it's rethinking in ways in all layers of the, from silicon to software to systems, you have to rethink everything. Every rule we have to rethink.
Excellent, excellent. And since you brought in that perspective of rethinking, reimagining, and how we're using AI in the operating system of the company, I'd like to bring in Darshan here. So Darshan, you do a great work. You do a lot of great work in creating thought leadership content as well as doing consulting work for very large companies. Of course, there are CXOs and a very highly ranked official of the government sitting here. But then, what are the other six CISOs, CXOs thinking about when it comes to AI? Is it still a compliance thing? Or has it percolated into strategy?
First of all, thank you. I'll probably add some context to whatever I've heard so far. So, first of all, my views is any technology disruption brings in two emotions, right? So, hope as well as fear. And I'm sure all the other panelists have rightfully covered the fear construct of AI in cybersecurity, and rightly so. No disputing that truth. But there is a huge hope component from a cybersecurity company, right, for us, because we are a hardcore deep tech cybersecurity company. I see a lot of opportunities. And we as a country, India, can also be, we are at the sweet spot between intersection between AI and cybersecurity. And this topic is very aptly crafted because I think it's a huge opportunity for us to also utilize. And I'll tell you why. Cybersecurity has so far been a very asymmetric equation. The intruders have always had an advantage, right, over the defenders or anyone who's actually defending a network, because they just need to get one thing right, and we need to get everything right, right? So it's always been asymmetric. But with AI, now all of a sudden we are at a level playing field, from a technology standpoint to identify a needle in the haystack. For example, one classic use case can be an agentic security operations center. Because at the end of the day, if you have ever visited a security operations center, it is a 24/7 someone, analyst looking at a screen and almost an inhuman job, so to speak. But today with AI, now you've got a level playing field, because we've seen those kinds of use cases being deployed at our SOC, where even a shift handover is done by an agent. So a lot of real use cases. So I'm on the hope side. There's a lot of opportunities that today we have. And second, in terms of talent, I mean, we have a lot of youngsters sitting in this room who are looking to grow. We have spoken so much about other services, other areas evaporating in terms of job opportunities. I think we can create the world's cybersecurity talent combination with AI, because cybersecurity and AI are not two different fields. Cybersecurity needs AI, and AI needs cybersecurity. So I think we are at a very, very opportune time for us to really ride this wave and create world-class talent which can address. So now on the second part which you just spoke about, in terms of what we are hearing at the CXOs globally, since we do deal with a lot of people in the payment ecosystem, CXOs obviously have the same construct of hope versus fear, right? So some are obviously, being a CISO or a CIO, there is amount of fear that is also coming in, because these are real problems, right? For example, deep fakes or spear phishing attacks have become more robust with AI. But one of the key things that we are trying to explain is that yes, those are things that you need to address, no doubt. But can you also look at how you can take advantage of those AI? And Lakshmi rightly pointed out, how do you have an AI operating system? Similarly, we talk about how you can have an AI security operating system, right? Which you should have a playbook on how to leverage AI rather than being on the defense player. Yeah. So those are my views, Samrat. Yeah.
No, excellent views, and thank you very much for those perspectives. And I'm glad that I still see people coming in. This is an interesting session, and some people standing as well. So I would like to bring in Pradeep now. Pradeep, as a follow-on to what I just asked Darshan, here is something which is, at the top, and we're saying, while it is percolating into strategy a bit, do you think that we should have a dedicated function within an organization? And what are you seeing currently, not just in India, but elsewhere as well?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So probably adding on to what Darshan said, right? I don't mind the hope and the fear thing, because being in the cybersecurity space, both of them do add more to what we can do, right? For the industry as a whole, for the country as a whole, if you would. When we look at strategically, when we talk to, let's say, leaders and boards at companies in India, across the world. Predominantly, when the conversation is about AI, the topic goes towards innovation, competitiveness, and ability to bring in, let's say, productivity gains, right? What often gets missed is that AI is quietly reshaping the risk equation within the enterprise, right? Now, cybersecurity, right? So can no longer be just about protecting systems and the data. Now, don't get me wrong, right? Cybersecurity is still needed to be able to identify all the systems within your enterprise, beyond the extended enterprise, as well as be able to protect the data that is on all of these systems. But it needs to evolve into something more, given the AI landscape, which is, I loved how Lakshmi put it, right? It's going to be about trust. So going forward, can cybersecurity, how can it evolve to start protecting decision making and trust? Because trust is starting to become measurable, right, through provenance, through authenticity, as well as verification. Now, all of these mechanisms are going to come in a way that we are able to identify, measure, rate, risk rank, and call out whether this particular transaction that you're doing, whether it's a payment approval or let's say an executive communication, is trustworthy or not. And then accordingly, the agent or the system that's allowing the transaction to go through allows it or not, right? So that's something that we are seeing, and AI in this context is a force multiplier, right, on both sides. For us as defenders, we are seeing, like Darshan said, how we are able to detect, identify threats at scale and speed that we have never seen before, right? And definitely, right, bringing in, again, it's not gonna, so if you ask, okay, is it gonna completely revamp how we do and run SOCs? A little, yes. It's not gonna replace all the analysts, but definitely in terms of certain tasks that we are doing, we've already started seeing Microsoft with its Security Copilot, how it can automate tasks, right? Like different agents doing different tasks of the SOC lifecycle. So we're already starting to see that. Now, but in addition to that, it's also helping attackers on the other side of the equation, which is, it is industrializing disruption at scale. Think phishing, think social engineering. Now, all of these manipulation, now it's happening at an unprecedented scale. Now, that's going to continue, and we're going to see it continue for, let's say, the next few years, because that's where we're headed. In terms of AI-related phishing, I would say, yeah, definitely manipulation, and how this is going to impact the industry as a whole. Now, I would say that's pretty much how all of these, the tectonic shift is happening, right, across. So as I would say, working with leaders and board members, we are looking at how to look at these risks and how to frame these risks. And here, usually we see three lenses. So one is the compliance risk, which is, am I complying with the EU AI Act, right? Am I complying with, let's say, DPDP or other sectoral guidance? So it's more of a check-in-the-box approach, maybe helps with me in protecting against regulatory exposure, but not with systemic risk, like what Ms. Daisy was saying. The second angle, which some companies have started to move towards, is the operational risk, right? Wherein the boards are starting to ask, the models am I using, is it reliable, is it safe, is it trustworthy? And what is the risk if this particular model or service provider who's providing that model goes down? So that's the operational risk angle that we are seeing more of. The third angle, which I think it's very few companies doing today, is probably the strategic risk angle, right? Wherein being able to call out, if I'm using this particular, if there's an AI-driven attack, identity attack, right? That is reducing or impacting the reputation of my organization with my customers. What is my exposure in financial terms? Now, these are questions that boards would start to need to ask, because we are starting to ask those questions and get those questions from leaders in order to how are we able to measure those, in how do you quantify risk in financial terms and be able to convey that to the board as well, because that's what, at the end of the day, boards are concerned in being able to convey to the stakeholders and shareholders.
No, that's great, and those are some interesting lenses that you put to the whole conversation. So, sir, I'd like to bring you in now, from your vantage point. So, when we talk about India's DPI, we are implementing AI into systems which cater to healthcare, which cater to telecom, across the citizen supply chain, if you will. So, how do we make sure that the AI deployments that we're doing, and what capabilities do we have to make sure that these deployments are secure and they're taking care of the risks that the fellow panelists highlighted?
Yeah. even now, we are really struggling with getting the cybersecurity maturity across all sectors. You know, the financial sector, for example, is mature. But let's say take the health sector. It's not as mature as others. But if you look at the enthusiasm, for example, of the health sector to adopt AI, you'll find that the level of enthusiasm is similar to what is there in the other sectors. So that is a big challenge. You know, we've been engaging with the health sector, for example. We've had recent meetings also to say that how do I improve the cybersecurity posture of that sector. So that's a big challenge, actually, so we had this digital divide. We have a cybersecurity divide that's there. And now we are going to have this AI divide that's going to be there across enterprises in different sectors. So that is a challenge that is required to be addressed. There, I think, is the capacity building part. And also coming up with, frameworks where people have access to that framework and understand what is really required to be done. And, you talked of assessment. When an enterprise is coming with the AI system, is it secure? Is it doing the work it's supposed to do? So we don't have those assessment frameworks now. So if you're aware, the testing and assessment part is an important part, and creating that infrastructure so that people could go and then test and assess that is important part. The department of DRDO has come up with an AI ETI framework, if you're aware of it. Similarly, from our office also, we funded a project, and it's around a year back. It started November of 2024. We funded the project for coming with an assessment framework for AI systems. So that one is the security aspect of that, and the other is, of course, the functional aspect. That also, in the sense that somebody claims that this AI system does something. So how do you actually assess that? So I think one is the capacity building part, and the other is having the frameworks in place is good. One thing good about this country is that we have an institutional framework that's been established, especially because of cybersecurity over the period of time, like we have got the CERT India and CIPC, or their institutional frameworks. And also the sectoral regulators also come up with sandboxing regulations, in the sense that if you want to try out something new, you have these regulations that helps you to try out something new. So I think these, like in the financial sector, you have the RBI sandboxing. The telecom sector also, there's a mechanism. So I think people start using these sandboxes to prove technologies, to prove applications, prove use cases, and that would help them to actually understand how it really works before they deploy in production. That, I think, would help going forward.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And I think it's enlightening and enriching for all of us here to know your perspective, especially what the government is doing towards it. I'd like to bring in Lakshmi sir from Tata here for the next question. So, sir, if we reconvene 5 years from now, here, what are we going to be talking about? What did we do? What did we get right?
I think these discussions are very healthy, right? Whether AI with a positive lens or with a fear lens, I think we need to. On two comments. One is the question on assessment. We ourselves in TataCom, when we asked ourselves the question, where do we want to be 5 years from now? And I made a statement that the next 5 years will determine the health of the company for the next 50 years. Right? Because the technologies are moving very fast. So for an assessment framework, we developed a framework ourselves. We studied a lot of material. We didn't find something good. So we developed an assessment framework where on one axis we plotted the capability. It includes talent. It includes the platform, which is when I said, look, no point in doing individual use cases in an organization. How many use cases will you do? You need a platform approach, which is where we said AI operating system is required. So that is maturing. So on one axis, we are going to plot the capability, right? So it's talent, even culture. AI, I don't know whether people have appreciated this, is a very different paradigm. Right? Even now in the discussions, I see people talking about how AI can help automate things and do things faster. No, that's not what AI will do. AI, while the previous technologies of cloud and internet have helped companies to scale transactions, AI is going to scale decisions. And when you're scaling decisions, you need to think of a different paradigm altogether, right? And we are still talking in the old paradigm of what task can be automated and how it can be done. So this is a new paradigm. So in the capability axis, The culture dimensions would have to be, thought through carefully, and talent appropriate. I find some of the younger talent are more easy to train on AI than some of the older, unfortunately. So I think the whole talent and capability equation is one axis, and we're going to plot ourselves. And the other axis is on the outcomes. What outcomes do you really want to deliver with AI? And there, outcomes could be more on efficiency. Outcomes could be more on the revenue enhancement. Outcomes could be more on the trust and the customer satisfaction. All those outcomes need to be plotted. I must admit, we ourselves are somewhere in the lower quadrant, and I hope we as a company will move to the top quadrant, and that needs to be defined, and that needs to be visualized, and only then you can move towards that. And that's what we are driving the company towards, and all the platform development that we're doing, strengthening our infrastructure for enterprises, and we've shared some of these assessments to our customers as well. So that is one. So I hope that most people would see themselves moving towards the top quadrant in 5 years' time. The second thing that I worried about in the context of strategy is, again, when people talk about AI and strategy, I believe that, like in the previous technology when we had internet and cloud, there were new business models that came about. Right? So we had intermediaries coming, the booking.coms and others who disintermediated many, many people, or fintechs who came and did things better than the larger banks. And only when the larger entities woke up to the fact that these people are going to eat their lunch, and they have and that's what happened in the previous wave of technology. In the AI, I think similar disruption is waiting to happen. Don't know where and when and what, but if a strategy does not think about that as to what disruptions are going to happen, we would have missed the bus. So 5 years from now, I would expect a new class of companies who are AI native, who are out there going to disrupt the existing business model. So those are the two things I would expect in 5 years to happen.
Fabulous. And sir, one last question to you, Nalin sir. If you were to give me a call 5 years from now and say, Samrat, this is how nation states have changed, what would that be?
See, one is, AI, and I've talked somewhere else also, adoption of AI is a competitive advantage. So that's why, you have to adopt AI, and you don't have any other, because there are other nations who would be going to adopt, there are other enterprises going to adopt AI, and they're going to try to look at how do I do business better. So that way, so going down, you'll find that nations, we would adopt AI, and actively, and this conference is very good for that. 5 years down the line, the other is protecting yourself from the adversarial effects of AI, because it's a very powerful tool. It's a powerful tool. And then, it's just a thought process now, but I think, as you pointed out, just 1 year we have found that such a lot of development has happened. We do not know where this is really going to lead us. So the thing is for us to be on our toes, to actually look through that, how is this technology going to affect the way we do business and how we run our countries. And then this development of capability, and identify the dependencies that we have when this technology is adopted, and try to see that how do I mitigate the dangers of those dependencies. This is where I think the thought process would be, and this is where I think the roadmap for the next 5 years for us.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you all the panelists for taking time out and agreeing to do this for the audience. I see the room is full and a lot of people waiting on the sides as well. Thank you all for paying attention. Please put your hands together for the esteemed panel that we have here together. We have to conclude this panel only for the paucity of time. Otherwise, we could have gone on. Thank you very much.